I'm Hanson Hossein, Director of the Digital Media Master's Program at the University of Washington. Welcome to Four Peaks Media Space. We're here today at the SIF Film Center. Through this show, we'll connect to creative thinkers on some hot-button issues of our digital age. With these thought leaders and our audience participants, we explore the four peaks of our region: innovation, entrepreneurship, entertainment, and community. Together, we'll find out how these four peaks are changing our lives right now and what's next. In this special one-hour episode, my guests are two groundbreaking filmmakers who pushed the limits of their medium and business model. Lynn Shelton filmed Humpday in a friend's house in a Seattle neighborhood. It won a Sundance Film Festival award in 2009. This gained Lynn an international reputation for her improvised, relationship-centric style. Matt Vancil called upon his many fans to fund his fantasy comedy web series, JourneyQuest. His strategy brought him a rare freedom as a filmmaker. Matt spells out his emancipation in JourneyQuest's closing credits: no studios, no networks, no cancellations. We'll speak to these two filmmakers about how they use this region to create their immersive story worlds. We'll also uncover how digital and gaming platforms are revolutionizing their industry. We invite you into our discussion. Use the Twitter hashtag #4FOUR-Peaks, P-E-A-K-S, and we'll track your questions. Lynn, Matt, welcome to Media Space and the Seattle International Film Festival.
Thank you.
Well, I've had a chance to watch a lot of your work over the last few weeks, and I was up very late watching all the $5 cover episodes because they were just so compelling. And Matt, I was laughing out so loud at Darkness Rising that my daughter called up from upstairs late one night and said, "Why is Papa laughing so loud?" So you guys have done some really great stuff that's got me really intrigued. But I thought just for the purposes of the show and for our audience that we establish you a little bit more. So Lynn, you went to art school. You worked on a trawler in the Bering Sea. You worked for a number of years as a film editor, not director. What compelled you, what compels you to be the director that you are now?
Yeah, it was a long, circuitous route to making narrative feature films for me. I actually got a BA in the theater at the University of Washington many moons ago, and then moved to New York to do theater. And theater and I kind of had a falling out. And so I ended up going to graduate school in photography. And that was where I discovered film and video, and it was really as a solo artist and very non-commercial work is what I was doing, like sort of painting with film, basically. And then my marketable skill was editing, digital video editing, which was new at the time. And so I was working as a part-time teacher and also a freelance editor. And I moved back to Seattle. I was in New York. I grew up in Seattle, moved to New York for about 10 years, came back when I was ready to pop with my child, who's now 12, so I guess that was about 12 years ago. And being a bigger fish in a smaller pond, normally it takes a long time to become a feature film editor because you've got to go through years of putting in your dues as an assistant and go through this sort of structure when you're in New York or LA. But in Seattle, I'm on the basis really of this one little short dance film that had some narrative elements. I got so much work as a narrative editor, and that was when I really started feeling like I really want to direct narrative film. And I hadn't gone to film school and I didn't know any crew members. I'd never actually worked in a collaborative way before, making movies. And then I got this very lucky break. There was a nonprofit film studio that was in existence, really active for about a year, called The Film Company. And they asked writer and directors to come and make films. And they basically just commissioned me to make my first feature. It was crazy. And that just changed everything for me. That was in 2005 that we were shooting it. It premiered in 2006. It was called We Go Way Back, and it won the grand jury prize at Slam Dance. And I knew I never wanted to work alone again, and it just started me on this totally different relationship to art, and it changed me as a human being.
It's
actually
amazing. As soon as you became a director, you started winning awards. I don't think you've actually not made a film won an award for it. So, in fact, when I was looking into what people say about you, I picked this up. I think it was from The Stranger. How does this fit with you? Semi-scripted, semi-improvised, pseudo-reality style is her forte. How do you feel about that?
Well, my very first film was completely scripted. It felt like I'd climbed out Mount Everest. I'd never written a script before. I'd always written, but mostly like poetry, I really, and some theatrical stuff, but I'd never written an actual script before, and I did it in the majority of it in about 5 weeks, and then continued to write and rewrite as we were working in pre-production and production and post. And I found it really frustrating not having worked in a traditional film, making way, that it seemed like we had all this. There was this amazing crew, huge crew, all of this equipment. We were using a 35 millimeter camera, but we had very little time, and so we'd spend. It felt like 90% of our time lighting, and then there'd be like 5 minutes to nail the scene. And these actors who I knew had, they in the audition I could see they had it all, but in that environment with 30 people standing around, and the pressure, and I don't know, it was really difficult it was not an easy, organic process getting the performances.
That's interesting, because you made that shift in your next film, My Effortless Brilliance, where it became a much more organic thing. In fact,
yeah.
Scott, can we just show that so we can give our folks a sense of what that is about, and then we'll come back to you on that one.
Okay.
It's actually been an amazing morning. I've gotten a lot of work done.
Do you have a girlfriend?
No, I don't. I did want to distinguish myself from the Fransons, the Leathams, and the Eggers.
I think you're a terrible friend.
I know. Surprise!
Well, do you want to come in or do you want to keep sitting in Pine Sap?
Here's to everything being good again. I've never seen anyone doing that in real life before.
It's called splitting wood. You want to help?
I'd love to help, but I only brought this. There's been one thing I've been wanting to ask you. Where is the other ant? I gotta say, man, this is a pretty amazing life you have here. It's really unexpected, but it's impressive.
So I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I can't stand watching my own stuff. And I'm here watching your trailer with a smile on your face. I love that.
I've never seen that trailer before.
Okay.
It's like, oh, what did they do? It's very intriguing. IFC Films must have put that together with the marimba. Very nice. Anyway, so that film was a complete experiment. I didn't know if it was going to work, but I knew that I wanted to try to make a completely actor-centered set. After my first experience making this film that seemed like it just was so hard on the actors. And it seemed to me like, if you have a film that looks gorgeous and it's got amazing production design and incredible lighting, but the acting sucks and the writing sucks, it's just not going to work, So I wanted to see if I could... I wanted to see if I could get performances that were so real. It felt like a documentary. I actually wanted it to have a documentary feel, like you felt like you were a fly on the wall and actually, And so I kind of set it up like a fake documentary. And I asked the actors into the development process really early on, especially, I really built the whole thing around Sean Nelson. And I asked him, I pitched him a character that was basically based on him. And then asked him if he'd be interested in, kind of doing this version of himself. And then he would just talk like, so all the lines are improvised, and he just talks like he talks. That was kind of the idea.
So that felt much more comfortable for you as a filmmaker as opposed to that really scripted, prescribed approach to putting things together.
Well, it's interesting because now that I've, Humpday was an evolution of that process, and once I saw that you could work that way. I also did other things like scaled the crew way down and basically ejected all the lighting equipment. I just made it very naturalistic. So the crew really understood that it was all about the performances, and they had to be very unobtrusive and just kind of, be.
It's very Dogma 95, actually.
It's very. They were huge. Yeah, huge influence for that first film. And then Humpday, I actually added a little bit of lighting and started to try to up the production value a little bit. And then I just shot another film. And this one has some name actors, Emily Blunt and Rosemary DeWitt and Mark Duplass, who was also in Humpday. And I brought out the tripod. I don't know if you've heard of this device.
I've heard
it's incredible.
This,
it actually
three-legged thing.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a new innovation. But so there's actually 2 shots and wide shots, and it actually feels. Again, I'm trying to get it to sort of feel like a real, movie, a narrative film. And I've sort of been easing back into. The next project I do, I think actually might be scripted, and I won't be precious about the lines. But if they're working, I'll go with it, because this was the first time I'd ever worked with really bona fide, movie actors who work in that way, who like to actually have a script to have as their spine, and then it's amazing what they can do with it. So having a taste of that now, I've come back around. It's really interesting. But whatever works has sort of been my motto, you know, whatever works. So.
Well, Matt, you're equally unorthodox, but in a different way. I mean, you don't necessarily have, I don't think you've played the same film festival role with your work, but so you're not necessarily an establishment darling with what you do, but you've amazing accomplishments with what you have created with JourneyQuest and Darkness Rising and your portfolio. And what you've done is basically created very tight-knit communities around your work to the point where they've actually wanted to fund some of those films. Mm-hmm. What has driven you to be a storyteller with film?
Wow. It just seemed like a natural outgrowth of what I had been doing, one hobby leading into the next, leading into the next. I never expected or intended to be
What was that
a
first
filmmaker.
hobby that led to film? It wasn't Dungeons & Dragons, was it?
Yeah. Specifically, the thing about Dungeons & Dragons that I, as a kid, that I found so endearing and interesting was that you're essentially telling a communal story. You have one person who is the storyteller, or the dungeon master, the game master, whatever, who builds the world, steers events, the god, the referee, the whatever you want to call it, and then you have other players who are creating characters that have to fit in the world. And there's debates in the gaming community, power gamers versus role players and whatnot, but it all comes down to, from the dungeon master's point of view, or the person who's running the story, making it so that everyone is having a good time, feels like they're participating, and that they are invested in the story and the world. And that came out of a love of literature, fantasy literature especially, fantasy movies of the 80s. And when I was in college, the group that became Dead Gentleman Productions, that I've done most of my work with, came out of my gaming group. When we were sitting around one day and said, hey, let's make a movie. So we spoke to the one film major at a school that does not have a film program. My partner, Ben Dobbins, to this day, we've worked on everything together, and started making films. And like I said earlier, I never expected or intended to be a filmmaker. And because of that, that was very liberating. I never expected to.
But you went to film school.
I did, but that was but graduate school. As an undergraduate, I was in writing and classics and publishing and such.
Don't you have a minor in orc?
Latin, Latin,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Well, classical languages and mythology and such.
Well, maybe we should show a little
Sure.
bit of some of the work that you've done. Scott, I'm not quite sure what would be most appropriate. Perhaps Darkness Rising or JourneyQuest, just to give a sense of Matt's style and content.
Dear goblin friends, please hear my song.
Yeah, you're dead.
At 29 minutes, 42 seconds. New personal best, Leo.
There's so many places I could stick that stopwatch.
All right, everybody roll an ish.
Initiative.
Oh, right, to see who goes first. I roll one of these dealies, then add my dex bonus +4.
No, just your dex bonus.
No, I also get +4. That's what improved initiative does, right?
What takes improved initiative?
Okay, order. Joanna, Cass, Gary, Osric, then goblins.
What about me?
You're dead.
Okay, so I take one of these and add my attack bonus, and
You get another attack.
I do.
You took first strike. When you go first and drop an opponent, you immediately get another attack.
Cool. Critical. I get another attack.
So, you know, at first there's a sort of a Monty Python-esque feeling for Puget Sound with this, but there's, and this is what struck me most about Darkness Rising, despite even the title, it felt very professionally done to me. It felt like your production values are really up there. Very humorous, but it felt, you know, there's no reason to think this was even close to being a homemade film. You were really trying to hit a certain standard.
Yes.
And I think you really accomplished that.
Oh, thank you.
So you brought in professionals to get it get it done.
To give it that specific look and to help market the film and find the audience, and that's how eventually it wound up on Netflix, where we found got another boost of audience support as people discovered the film. But this film grew directly out of one that was an entirely homegrown effort called The Gamers, which was my first thing that I had directed. I'd written features that we'd done before. It was my first attempt directing. And as I was saying earlier, because I never intended or expected for this to be anything more than a hobby, I didn't feel a pressure to aim for an industry standard sort of reel to get into festivals or film school or find agents or whatnot. So again, that was very liberating. It was fun to do whatever I felt. It was more what I wanted to
So
see.
it's a passion project,
yeah.
not something you were doing for a living.
And that managed to hit a remarkable niche in the hobby gaming community, found an international fan base, and all of a sudden, we're selling enough copies of this that it makes sense to do a feature and actually get investors for that. And so that's how that came about. And then after Dorkness, I was accepted into film school in California at the American Film Institute, and here I am now.
So you got into AFI because of Dorkness?
Can you believe it?
Isn't it amazing?
Have they seen this movie?
So somewhat of the power of the web there, Lynn, you did a $5 cover recently with MTV, which was a little bit different for you because it was a series of, I think, 12 webisodes. What I found really interesting about this project, because it was very different from Humpday and from My Effortless Brilliance in terms of both style and even how you put it together, but the story structure was really compelling. The fact that you took what could have been 12 fractured episodes and really gave everything a beginning, middle, end, both with each episode and with the overall arc. How much did you have to work at that to get that done?
It was an intricate process, and not only was it, did I want to have, I wanted it to have that kind of structure where each webisode was like a chapter in the grander scheme, you know. So you could watch just episode 7 by itself, and it would sort of stand alone, but you really want to see all of them one after another because they sort of build on each other and create their own overall arc. So not only was I attempting to do that, but it was all based on reality. It wasn't reality, but it was based on reality, meaning that I was trying to actually create a portrait of these individual musicians, because
Who aren't actors, by the way.
No, they're all non-actors. They're musicians. I mean, I was sort of counting on the fact that since they are performers, that, you know, they would hopefully have some semblance of, you know, a little bit less self-consciousness, knowing they were being watched, you know. And it did seem to pay off. I mean, quite a few of them, as it turned out, most of them turned out to actually be quite facile on camera. And it was always an interesting challenge to see how to unlock their ease in front of the camera. But ultimately, again, we were, you know, I was trying to just get them to be themselves. So I wasn't actually asking them to, you know, memorize lines and play a character. They were really just being themselves, which helped a lot. But the storylines were all based on their actual lives. You know, so I had them hanging out with the actual people from other bands, you know, their actual friends that they would have been hanging out with in the places that they'd be hanging out in, and actually often recreating, you know, retracing little stories that they had told me from their own lives. So I really developed it like a documentary, and then we created this kind of this narrative. I don't know what to call the genre. It's really unusual.
I don't either. It's sort of it's like stories within stories that all seem to flow well together. In fact, this is why I stayed up late to watch all 12 episodes in one night, because I wanted your characterization. Your characters are fabulous, and I wanted to know what was going to happen to their van, the Beast. So we're going to go to a clip of $5 cover just so you get a sense of that.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, I don't know why I parked so far away. I'm in like Yogi Bear 47. Wait a second. Wait. Hey, sweetie, listen to this. I'm at Costco right now, and it's Dissatisfaction. You know, we saw them at Gizmo. They work here. Yeah, they're just like running parks around.
You're so cute, honey. I feel like I look good today. You do. Very sexy. Like, super sexy. Sexy girlfriend. I've got such a sexy girlfriend. Wish you had one too, but you don't, and I do. Oh, I've got such a sexy girlfriend. Wish you had one too, but you don't, and I do. I got you. Oh, I've got such a sexy girlfriend. Yeah. It's about me too, though, you know, so you have to sing it back. It's about me. It's kind of selfish, but it's okay. You're so sexy.
Should record that.
Okay, let's work on it tonight.
Yeah.
My ode to Stasia.
They're probably gonna catch us scooping off.
I know, right? Go ahead.
Alright.
I've got such a sexy girlfriend. Wish you had one too.
It's amazing what a Costco parking lot can inspire. Really, a good sense of place.
There,
yeah.
and they really, that's how they would write songs. Is, you know, I just sort of interviewed every musician and asked them, you know, how do you create your work? How do you collaborate? What do those relationships look like? What do those processes look like? And I was, as a non-musician, I'm completely, but a music lover, you know, I'm completely compelled by that and fascinated by it. And so it has this sort of documentary element as well. So it reveals, and you see, that was just like little highlights, but there's this whole process of them in their little, oh my God. So they were living in this rental house, and their voiceover mic was set up, their vocal mic was set up in their closet. So they would literally slide the door, move their clothes over, you know. And it was like, I have to show that. Like, that's just incredible. So it made it really easy in a way, because the thing sort of wrote itself, you know, in a way.
And I imagine, because you've worked so long as an editor, you actually probably, when you're creating your films, do you still have an editor's eye when you're even directing?
I definitely, yeah. I mean, for instance, the My Effortless Brilliance, Humpday, and $5 cover, the processes that, you know, where I'm setting up 2 cameras and I'm just asking actors to, you know, so that I have one on each actor and we don't have to ever repeat lines, so they can improvise and do whatever they want. I couldn't do that process. I couldn't make films that way if I wasn't an editor, because I'm just sort of, there's part of my brain that's always keeping track and making sure there's going to be enough. I'll just turn on the camera for 40 minutes, you know, and then I'll know that we're going to cut it down to a 5-minute scene later. But I have to make sure there's enough material in there. And if I didn't have that editing background, I don't think I could work that way.
Okay. Well, you know, let's break for a moment. When we return, we'll speak to Matt on his views on storytelling. We're back at the SIF Film Center with Matt Vancil and Lynn Shelton. Matt, with regard to story, I teach storytelling in my digital media program. There was a line that came up in Darkness Rising that just sort of woke me up. Not that I was falling asleep during your film, but this line is fabulous. And they were talking about gaming, but I think it really refers to story generally. Story trumps rules.
Yes.
What does that mean?
What that means is story is paramount. You can look at that from an actual logistical aspect of filmmaking, as in how do you choose to edit? Do you edit for performance? Do you edit for continuity? I always want to edit for performance, capture the performance and the reality of it. As far as a broader sense of storytelling, I think that stories, particularly speculative fiction stories, fail when they lose their reality. Specifically, belief in the world and the people in the world, whether or not they actually believe in the reality that you've constructed in your world building. And also, when you lose a sense of scale or relatability. You can tell a story in any setting that you want, as long as your audience finds a way in, finds a way to relate to the characters and to their struggle. And just say, I'm that guy. If I had to be a ridiculous wizard, I'd be him. Sort of thing. I can see myself in.
Are you a ridiculous wizard?
That's one of the epithets I've been called, yeah.
And here, you know, we are so beholden to these tenets of storytelling that seem, you know, we teach Aristotle and Joseph Campbell. Mm-hmm. And I just love how there's almost a self-consciousness to story and the use of story in your own films. The fact that you go as far as calling your series JourneyQuest, which is like really emphasizing that there's a journey here and there's a quest involved, just to make sure you didn't get it the first time around.
Intentionally redundant, yes.
Let's go to a clip from JourneyQuest.
I think they're looking for glory.
Lectorid quas orkshaguds
Subjas quas orkshagak aka.
Orkshaguds dovnak shug, Huano!
Gor orkshagak aka. Jadgazad prukan bazimanuds pedkak.
Kubaka kakathas. Lorakiruk nidaka.
Nu kelly manuds unkesna pa grinar zykrinaya ruzukai quick.
Sword! Yes, Lectorid quas orkshagak aka!
Kakwagaroots.
Gwet.
Engak nobo. Hedumai! Vardu Kaldusha!
Gwet.
So Matt, you believe so much in creating this immersive story world that you went ahead and created your own language as well.
Yes.
Was that important? Why didn't you just steal Tolkien's orc language?
Well, copyright infringement for one. But specifically why the orcs are actually speaking a structured language instead of gibberish is back into the reality of the storytelling right there. By crafting a language where I could actually point at the words and say, this is where you're speaking thus, it helps steer the performance. So where you know where to emphasize and where to stress and what to skip over. And you can actually, once you've take the subtitles away, if you've seen it once or twice, you can still understand basically the structure of what they're saying. And put that together just with some of the language training I'd had over the years. I've studied in high school, I studied German, and then as part of the classics major, Latin and Greek. And I've forgotten all of them, but I've remembered enough to include the endings so that it's pretty much a drag and a drop language. Once I have the root word, I can plug that in and create any sentence with the very limited vocabulary we put together for the shoot.
So Lynn, Matt's creating whole new languages for his characters, and you have them improvising. It's like a different world. I wanted to make a switch to business models because I think you both have really pushed the envelope with how you actually get your work done. Lynn, I think a couple of your movies were friends and family funded. Then, I don't know if you ever looked at the Wikipedia entry for you, for Lynn Shelton, but the last line is, Humpday, quotes, was not a financial success. I mean, how do you feel about, I
would beg to differ.
Yeah, so you should get that corrected first of all. But what is your business model up to before the time you did?
Well, it depends on your standard, isn't it? I mean, by an independent film like, well, I don't even know if it was an independent film. But the one of the movies that comes up a lot as a filmmaker of my kind of caliber is Juno, for some reason, comes up a lot because it's sort of a quirky indie feeling film. And it made, I don't know how many, $200 million or something like that. And it wasn't made for that much, so it was an enormous...
That's a financial success in Hollywood
what a financial
terms, right?
success
so
is,
what constitutes
exactly.
success for an independent filmmaker such as yourself?
Being able to continue making films. I mean, I was a part-time teacher and a freelance editor for years and years and years and figured that I would continue to have to do that kind of work, or I mean, it was fine. It was just I was getting to make my movies on the side. School break would come up, and I'd shoot something, and I'd edit at night and whatever. And I haven't taught in 2 years. I haven't had time.
So filmmaking is your day and night job.
Filmmaking is now my day and night job. That to me is financial success. Being able to pay the mortgage with the work that I do. That's all I need. I don't really need anything else.
That's it. So there are clearly different definitions of success in the filmmaking world, especially by Hollywood metrics. I mean, Matt, you've actually gone even further with the closing credits of JourneyQuest by saying very pointedly, no studios, no networks, no cancellations. Why is freedom so important to you when you're creating your films?
Because you don't want to have any artificial dictums steering the story that you're telling, or artificially shortening or lengthening or speeding up the unfolding of the story that you've planned. A lot of the credit on the business model for JourneyQuest goes to, all of it actually goes to Ben Dobbins, who spent, my partner at Zombie Orpheus, who spent a year and a half doing intense research on how to monetize a web series and keep it generating enough to both expand, grow its audience, and pay everyone without ever having to risk being canceled by an outside source or an outside source of funding. And what he discovered in his research flipped how we're actually marketing the film. We're not in the business of selling individual units. We're in the business of creating a long-term sustainable fan base. And what he discovered in the course of his research is that what the internet is best at is creating totally free, perfect copies of your work and distributing them for free. And you can do a couple of routes at this point. You can either, like the movie industry or like the recording industry, you can try to fight this and go after the consumers of your media, which are your customers, or you can embrace it and say it as, you know, we've actually seen a lot more views since people started copying our work. So we released it under a Creative Commons license, which basically said, which is part of the tag at the end of the no cancellation, no studios, no networks, is to say, share it, spread it, remix it. We've
and
seen,
donate it if you like it.
And donate if you like it.
And have you got donations?
Yes, we have.
Enough to pay for the production?
We are halfway to recoupment of our first season budget, and that's not including DVD sales.
Huh. Don't you ever wish, I mean, this has happened with you, Lynn, with the momentum you've had in your career, that you've now got MTV paying for series and Mad Men getting paid to do these things. Don't you ever wish, when you look at the quality of films that you put out on your very limited budget, to actually get that blockbuster budget one day to do all those effects like you've seen in the films that you grew up with?
I mean, it's a nice dream. Of course, everyone wants to say, I'd love to have a movie in theaters and whatnot. I'd love to be a summer tent pole thing. But frankly, I don't know what I would do with that budget.
Good food?
Yeah, oh yeah. Brilliant catering.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'd hire
tent pole.
Put
That's
it in
an
the
interesting-
food first.
I mean, despite your success, Lynn, have you seen an incremental increase in, or not incremental, exponential increase in your budgets? Or are you still sort of playing in the same economics that you've had since
Well,
My
it
Effortless
depends on the
Brilliance?
need of the production. So, you know, My Effortless Brilliance and Humpday and Your Sister's Sister actually were all, which is my new film that I just shot in November, they were all designed to be cheap. And you have to think about those things in the script. So I very specifically had fewer scenes where more things take place, because every new scene, the more number of scenes you have, the more days you're going to need to shoot, and the more setups, and the more, you know, so on and so forth. Fewer characters, fewer scenes, fewer locations, all of those things will add up to being able to do an entire shoot in 7 or 10 or 12 days, which is what each of those films, that's the amount of time I needed to make a feature film, which is insane. I mean, it's just not done. You know, it's usually at least 4 weeks is usually the minimum that you need. So, and the minimal number of days means that, and the minimal number of crew members and so on, you know, that scale just means that it's going to be cheaper. And when you have a lower budget, it just provides you with so much freedom, like Matt was saying. I mean, you don't need you don't need the profits to be as large in order to recoup and then to pay everybody back, and, you know, so it's really nice. And now, having gone through a little bit, getting a taste of developing multi-million-dollar projects with studios and with independent producers who are going to be looking for studios or for, you know, financing, you really have to think about, well, what are the numbers? How are we going to make this money back? You know, and so what level of, you know, and they really have these formulas for what level of an actor, you know, name recognizability that actor has to be at in order to be able to recoup the foreign numbers. I mean, it's all formulated, and you really have to think about. It's very constricting. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to make a great movie, but it's a very different process. And the main thing is that what I've discovered with friends of mine too is that it's a process that can drag on for a long time. And I'm somebody who discovered,
like to get it done.
I'm a late bloomer. I came to filmmaking, which is what I've always meant to do, and I didn't get to it until later in my life. And I really feel like I feel this sense of urgency, and I have to make a film a year or so, you know, like I really, and it's just so empowering. It's all about empowerment, you know, now with the equipment, the level of the quality of digital video cameras and the range of choices that you have and lenses you can use and so on and so forth. You can get beautiful quality, and it doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg.
You shot JourneyQuest with an SLR, a photographic camera.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with what you're saying about the freedom that the new technology provides. I mean, just 10 years ago when we were doing the original Gamers, we shot that on what was then a top-of-the-line prosumer camera, a one-chip Sony Mini DV cam, with terrible sound and very grainy footage. 10 years later, we're doing JourneyQuest on a Canon 7D.
Full HD for,
Full
really,
HD
for $3,000, basically, right?
Basically, yes. And our lighting kit, because we shot the majority of it outside, was 2 handheld LEDs for lighting faces and getting under the wizard's hat and whatnot, and then 2 bounces. And so we were able to, like Lynn was saying, with the wanting to keep movement, keep flow. We didn't have 45-minute setups between changing lights, so you managed to keep a sense of momentum always going through there, so that the actors maintained the, again, the reality of the performance, where they were in the scene without. It's very hard when you can focus on, we're going to do this intense scene for 8, 9, 10 takes. Okay, everyone break for 40 minutes while we relight. Now capture that again, and we'll start up.
Well, what surprises me about what you both have been able to do, despite your success, or maybe with your success, is that you remain here in this region. Lynn, I had assumed that with your growing reputation, even in Hollywood, that your next film was going to be shot elsewhere, and now I find out that you actually shot it in the San Juans with Emily Blunt. I mean, you've got a name actor this time.
Yeah.
Why do you insist on remaining here?
Because it's my home. I mean, I'm a huge booster of the local film community, and I not only do I want to make my own films here as much as possible, but I'm gonna, be dragging other productions here and cheerleading for.
You couldn't
other
have moved Mad
productions
Men
to
when you
come
did the
here.
Mad Men episode. You couldn't.
That
do,
was not possible, sadly. But yeah, and I know that I'm going to be traveling and I'm going to be doing jobs elsewhere. But whenever possible, I'm going to be bringing. I mean, it's sort of my second family, my crew that I've worked with, and it's malleable, and there's a very deep bench of really talented crew members here, and I want them to stay, so I don't have to go away and be away from my family when I make movies. And so, in order for them to be able to afford to live here, there has to be work that's going on, all year round.
And what I love with both of your bodies of work was that it's not your typical scenes. It's not the Space Needle and the waterfront. I mean, I like the line.
Yeah,
no Space Needle shots, right? Yeah. So with $5 cover, I think you did an interview and said you basically wanted to push the reset button on how our region is seen. It's not just Nirvana and caffeine all the time. Why was that so important for you to actually sort of create that accurate portrayal of our region?
I mean, I just was really interested in showing that insiders, locals, view of what it's really like to be here, And if you got to go to Seattle, I mean, watching $5 cover Seattle is basically like, it all takes place over the course of like a Friday through a Sunday. So it really, I wanted it to feel like you got to go and hang out with this really cool group of natives, and see what it was really like to go from club to club and be at the Tractor and be at Chop Suey and be at these, speakeasies, after-hour speakeasies.
It made me very proud as a Seattleite. You got 90.3 coming up on the radio in the car. It's like, wow, that's KXP. I listen to KXP.
Yeah, there's an in-studio and KXP. Yeah. I wanted the institutions. I've at one of the independent music stores, Easy Street, and yeah, I really wanted. The locations were sort of as carefully cast as all of the bands and the characters.
Seattle's a character. But we got to give Tacoma some love. You live in Tacoma.
That
you
I do.
shoot in Tacoma. Mm-hmm. How has the landscapes of this region figured into your work?
Well, it's the landscape for this region is wonderful for doing fantasy because it's so lush and whatnot. It's like it's a little.
So we don't do fantasies in Hawaii, I guess. Huh?
Well, you can. It'd just be. How do you explain knights and chainmail and palm trees? I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just if you can make it work, go for it. Yeah.
I think we should start breaking taboos.
Sounds great. Yeah. Specifically for this region, one of the things that makes this region such a great place to film is it's like why Hollywood was originally chosen, in that you're about 2 hours from any type of terrain you could possibly need. Mountains, ocean, forest, earthquake. And here, specifically, we not only have very well-preserved woodlands and wildlands, but we also have a lot of beautiful ruins and old forts and such that can substitute for dungeons, castles, and whatnot. We've taken advantage of those.
That's what I found most amazing about JourneyQuest and Darkness Rising, is that had I not known that you were from this region, I would not have actually thought that we were in Western Washington. You really managed to evoke this medieval European look, and I didn't think we had it here.
You have to look for it. You do a bit of digging, but it's there. And that's where the role of location scouting and thorough preparation comes into play. It would be very easy on a few of these things to punt and take a location that's not quite what you need. Like on Darkness Rising, we looked for a year and a half for the interior of our inn, and nothing fit. Either it was something that had a carpet, or they wanted to charge us, or it was the perfect location, but they wanted to charge us the $4,000 a day wedding rate. Or there was an ice machine somewhere, some great anachronism there that would have thrown it off completely. And in the end, we built it. Our phenomenally talented production designer, Matt DeMille, who just graduated from AFI himself, built it in a garage with the appropriate materials, and it reads really well.
We've talked a lot about JourneyQuest and your love for games in that community, but your newest project is actually far more interactive. And in fact, what's interesting to me is that you seem to be taking your focus on storytelling, your love for story, and connecting it to what this region offers a lot of as well, which is video gaming platforms. Can you explain a little bit more about what you're working on right now?
Sure. The project I'm working on now is called March 32nd, and it is a video game being done by a Seattle studio called Chromed. But it's deliberately blurring the lines between video games and television. As the founder of the company, Irfan Chowdhury, puts it, it is TV as a video game. The project is going to be released in 12 playable episodes with a very simple interface. It's a heralds back to the era of the point-and-click graphic adventures of Sierra or LucasArts. But like a choose-your-own-adventure, there are many, many branches throughout each episode. So that you're making a choice in sending the detective one way or another at many points throughout the game. And unlike a lot of games that have a choice-based system right now, which is a morality-based choice system, tends to push people or encourages people towards one extreme or another, because there are rewards and gameplay rewards for, saying, being 100% good or 100% evil. There's nothing like that in this game. It's just a matter of react appropriate to the situation, or how you think the detective should react. And the story creates many, many, many iterations based on that.
How comfortable is this for you as a filmmaker to be going into this world?
Well, as a filmmaker, personally, it draws on a lot of the stuff that I've been doing. Like when we began the interview, we spoke about how a lot of my experience came from that original role-playing game session where you are a storyteller and referee, but essentially you're not telling an active story, you're telling a reactive story. I can put all the pieces in play and then say, you as the character, what do you do? Right. What's your reaction? I have to be prepared to anticipate and respond in a way that is appropriate and realistic, so that we don't shatter the illusion of the story that you're creating. So that plays into it. Also, lots of years of improvisational experience, both doing improv comedy and improving with actors on set. Is you can't be territorial with your script. You have to allow them a bit of freedom in interpretation in the lines. So it's bizarre because you have multiple ways through every single scene, which means you have to shoot multiple ways through every single scene and script multiple ways through every single scene, and make sure that the different iterations of those track logically and consistently.
Is this you've done web series? Is this of any appeal to you as you think about stories down the line?
I mean, it's really fascinating because, right in the very beginning when you're talking about Dungeons and Dragons and allowing, I'm a total control freak. So the first time I worked,
despite the improvisational approach,
well, yeah, it was terrifying. I mean, it was absolutely terrifying to give up that kind of control. But I found that it was also incredible if I could grit my teeth and get through it. It was really liberating too, and it tended to. I mean, if you really give people, if you throw people the ball, I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's the ultimate creation is so much more interesting and multifaceted than if you tried to sit down and make it all, control it all yourself and storyboard it and figure out every single little word. And it's really, I think that it's a beautiful thing to be able to invite people into the process. Mm-hmm. And it's great to have. Everybody is more invested because there's, they really feel valued, and not just the cast, in coming up with helping to shape the script, but also the crew. And so the idea of taking it one step farther and inviting, the audience to really help. I mean, it's just a logical sort of next step. And it's so $5 cover. I mean, it wasn't an interactive series, but there was an interactivity to the way that the whole thing was designed. So I wrote and directed and shot and edited 12 episodes as kind of the core of the thing. But then overall, there's something like 16 hours of material on that website. And what happens is Coincidence TV is a platform that designed the site, and as one of the episodes is playing, you'll see underneath little links to either a documentary, a short documentary about the band that's currently playing a song or something in my webisode, or a website to take you to the Blue Moon Tavern history page, because that's where they are. And there's all these little, and you can actually click on these. Sometimes the video will keep playing in the corner as you go up and get to explore web pages. And so it was really designed to be this experience that you keep diving into and exploring and going farther and farther into. And it was a really different sense than just a standalone hour-and-a-half long,
Well, you know what, we're going to take our final break, actually, and when we come back, we'll speak to our audience and just explore this idea of multifaceted storytelling a little bit more. We're back at the SIF Film Center with Matt Vancil and Lynn Shelton. At this point, I'd like to call upon my colleague Craig Baker, who is an entertainment lawyer here in the Seattle area and has a really good sense of the connection between story and the technological resources that we have in this region and how we can build upon some of the things that you're looking at, Matt. So Craig, what do you think about this conversation and where we're going with story in this area?
Well, I think it's really interesting because both Matt and Lynn have shown the way, what I think is unique about the Pacific Northwest, which is we've taken what is essentially a weakness, which is not necessarily great depth or opportunity in creative storytelling and filmmaking, and turned it into a strength, which is everybody has to sort of scramble. And so you get involved in gaming, and you get involved in small short-form content, and you get involved in long-form feature films, and everybody is sort of looking around to see what's happening. And I think what has evolved out of that is this incredible sort of digital media platform, an interactive media platform with all of the gaming that we have in Seattle, like Real Networks and Big Fish Gaming and Nintendo and Pokemon and Microsoft and everybody else. I mean, it's amazing when you actually look all the way up and down the gaming side. And I think we're really so well positioned on a going forward basis to explore all these sort of next generation multi-level storytelling that you were starting to get into before the last break that Lynn and Matt are exploring. But I think what's really unique about it and really exciting about it is that you don't become a genre filmmaker up here because there isn't enough work to be a genre filmmaker, and you don't become a short form advertising director because it's not, you have to sort of be an expert in multiple levels of storytelling, and I think that really sort of then facilitates that innovation and creativity, and we've seen that both in terms of development of technological platforms for non-traditional distribution like Xbox Live and some of these other platforms, as well as just experimentations in storytelling.
Does that allow us to become an alternative to Hollywood? Do we even want to play in that space? Are we the future of storytelling and filmmaking?
It was interesting. I read an article probably 5 or 6 years ago about sort of digital Hollywood and where that was going to be next. And this was actually in the LA Business Journal. And they were and are still scared to death about where is filmmaking and sort of the video consumption going to go. And I think now that we're starting to see sort of over-the-top delivery of internet series and Netflix delivering series, and you don't know where they came from, that they don't have the sort of brand around what they're doing, and so many people cutting the cord and using Boxy and Hulu and other things to sort of consume their content, you're really starting to see that traditional curation that the traditional distributor position that the networks had has gone away. And so it's the question about whether or not you trust them to curate your content, or whether you feel like you can curate your content yourself, or whether your friends are going to curate your content.
Which is what the Netflix rating system, and Hulu's got a pretty good rating system
Absolutely.
as well now. So you don't require that institutional credibility system, which is what Hollywood has been for so long.
Correct. So I don't think in the short term there's going to be any change, but I think if you look at the medium term, both because of this democratization of film production opportunities, the fact that so many people want to participate now in not just receiving their content universes, but participating in those content universes. It's fascinating to see. I think it started on the genre side that sort of the Matt and I both sort of grew up in about participating in those things, but I think you're starting to see that passion about, Desperate Housewives and a lot of sort of genres that we wouldn't necessarily think of, the consumers and the sort of receivers of the content wanting to participate in the creation of the content. And, we're all now in a post-Facebook generation, content creators, and I think people are taking more responsibility and feeling a larger sense of entitlement of wanting to be able to create in those spaces.
So that's great. How about we get you to start jockeying the mic around for questions, and while
Excellent.
we're doing that, just ask you, based on what Craig has had to say, does this leave you hopeful in terms of, you guys both pioneered some unique business models and some unique work as well. Does this leave you hopeful about what you might be able to accomplish going down the road?
Yeah, yeah. It's one thing I would say is that the idea of Seattle being a competitor to Los Angeles or Hollywood or something is not something I'm interested in. I just want to have a viable regional. The way I sort of think about it is Seattle is, and there are a lot of other cities that aren't New York and LA, where I would like to see, I love seeing that homegrown regional film and other media, creation sort of community, because you do get, there's an entrenchment that happens, I think. There's a mental sort of limited vision, tunnel vision that happens, and you all you think about is the commercial viability, and I have to have this kind of budget, and I have to have this kind of element to my story, or it's not going to, and it's not good for, I like to approach this as an art form, not as, and you really, when you're looking at films, there are people who say it's not art, and they'll argue with you to the ends of the ends of days, which is like in 3 hours, right? That it's commerce and not art. But I'm not one of those believers. For me, and I'm sure it can be certainly, but for me, I like to approach it as an art form that continues to evolve and add something new to the conversation. And so.
So what we're talking about here is freedom.
I feel like it's freedom and empowerment, and if you're outside, I think it really helps to be physically outside of those, of that place. And so I like to think of it as an alternative, as opposed to a competitor. I'd rather think of it as an alternative.
We're not in competition the way that we used to be. For example, like in a web series or anything that is independent in when it streams, you're not up against another show in the same time slot the way that you used to be. You're not, if your movie is streaming on Netflix or is available online, video on demand, whatnot, it's not a situation where it's going to be in this theater for only these 2 weekends and I've only got $10, which movie do I see? The competition is going away. We can support one another in a way that the commerce did not allow in previous generations of media.
Finding your niche audience.
Exactly, and then making the most of that and catering to that niche audience, not to say I'm only going to cater to these people, but to use that as a wonderful base from which to grow. Because you've got a proven model, you've got a proven track record with that content. You have an audience that will stick with you when you start to experiment, and that gives you a freedom that you wouldn't normally have if you ask, what would you do with a budget of $50 million or whatnot? Probably not anything very very risky, because you want to make that back.
Exactly, it allows you to take risks. Humpday never would have been made ever in a million years if it had been studio-backed or
would have been the loss for it.
The normal system.
I think somebody's got the mic.
I was wondering, is there any forethought yet on what you might want to do with cloud networking? Because I've heard that as a really viable alternative for downloadable content, and that idea of perpetual expandability really is lent to by that, I think, because you wouldn't need to download per se, it would just be a matter of server space, and the popularity would be a good reason in itself for the expansion of that asset. So I would think that, whatever company, Microsoft or whatnot, would love that, especially since they don't have something like a Blu-ray disc, and you wouldn't have to worry about disk space.
So you're talking specifically about the content, the filmmaker's content residing in the cloud and being readily accessible and expandable.
Yeah, because when it comes out to, you buy it, it may have preset means of choosing amongst possible scenarios, but it is preset, so there's a limit. But if it was cloud, you could produce it as people play and maybe learn based on how they play to decide what kind of new experience you could build into the game on top of what you've already done.
Oh. You just always be in production.
You'll always be in production, so you might actually have your characters from Humpday go through with it at the end. Sorry, I just gave it away.
In one scenario. It's like a TV series is in production for, depending on how many episodes, might be from 4 to 8 months out of the year, and it would be sort of along those lines, but you would just keep building on top of the same storyline. It's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I haven't worked directly with cloud technology. It sounds like where things are going, though.
Yeah.
The place I think I first heard about this was a wonderful blog called Kung Fu Monkey, which is written by John Rogers, who is the showrunner on Leverage, which films down in Portland. And he's made the argument for years that where we watch things and where we download things are going, and where we play things are all going to become the same thing. We're seeing a convergence of media and media types and platforms into, you could say, a singularity, where we're all going to consume media on one thing.
I think it's a good way to end this conversation with that point on the horizon that sounds quite inevitable, actually.
Yeah.
So, well, for our live viewers, the show's not over. Stay with us right here for a Four Peaks Salon to chat further with Lynn and Matt. Thank you all for joining us here at the SIF Film Center. Tune in again next month online and on air for the next episode of Four Peaks Media Space. I'm Hanson Hossein.